After reading Chapter 6 in 5 Levers to Improve Learning, which lesson stood out to you the most and why? Well, after reading the vignettes, the one that stood out the most to me was spend less time chopping down trees and more time starting campfires. In this metaphor, it states that there is either a physical or a chemical reaction. In a physical reaction, particles or substances are rearranged. No new substance is created, and the substance merely takes on a different appearance. In my time as a teacher, I have seen many new teaching ideas that are all the rage. In reality, that's just a new system that's just like the old system with a new name or new acronym. Nothing really changes other than the name of this particular system. It still has the same organization, the same structure, and in the end, the same outcome. And so there's not really a change, a chemical change, because everything is still the same. In the next lesson, or the next question, what can you compare this lesson to in your previous experiences? I can compare this vignette to something like it's just spinning your wheels. Just like all the effort you put into chopping down a tree into separate logs, the tree is still a tree until it's got a chemical change to change its format. I see this happening a lot within the schools. For instance, each year there comes out a new acronym for all of the new rage for a new thing that happens in teaching. This can be something like a discipline system. In the school in which I currently teach, this applies to the discipline system that we have in order. The system is currently in place. It's called Equine Essentials, which we changed the name, and now it's Eagle Essentials. This strategy is to help, is like training a horse. You have different steps that you apply to horse training into the system of discipline. This system has been in place for several years, and now we are adding to the Eagle Essentials, and this is like color cards. So you have a red card and a yellow card. Well, it's just like the same thing. It's taking a tree, chopping it up into different pieces. It's not anything new. It's the same process, the same thing. It's just got a different name. All of these systems, again, are just like chopping logs. Nothing is different. But if change is going to happen, there has to be a chemical reaction for a substantial change to occur. In this case, I think for a real change to happen within the discipline system, whether it's the Equine Essentials or the Eagle Essentials, that for a true change to occur, all teachers participating must have a buy-in. That is the only way that there's going to be a true chemical change or reaction to what has already been occurring. If you just take the same system and chop it up into different logs without that chemical change, it's going to be the same effect. There's not going to be any difference. You have to get the teachers to buy into what's happening to make that physical chemical change. What can you apply this lesson to in your current position? Well, this lesson can be applied when you really want a change to happen within the school. Throughout my course of teaching, I've taught in 7 different schools in 3 different states. Each state has its own form of intervention for students with a different acronym or name, but it's all the same thing. What do we do for low-performing students? How do we reach them? The problem is just like with the tree, that we take the reasons for why students are performing low, like a bad home life, no discipline, low socioeconomic or race, and we just chop up the logs. Schools need to do a better job in finding how to reach these kids, not by chopping up the logs, not by putting labels on them, but finding really what it is that they're struggling with so that we can help make them better. There are so many students who slip through the cracks, or they're passed on from year to year with these labels. Oh, they have a bad home life, so they can't really succeed. Well, that's not really true. We've got to find a way to reach these kids. Don't get me wrong, there are many excellent teachers out there who are reaching these kids and are doing an excellent job. But as a teacher or an administrator, I just want to encourage teachers to empower them and to empower my staff when I become a principal and have my fellow colleagues to do something to try to find a way to reach these kids so truly every kid can succeed, and to try to reach out, even if it's just one kid, to make a big difference in that child's life. You can't win it all. There's going to be some kids who are resistant, but you've got to find a way to reach that one, and in order to make a chemical reaction within their brains and to help them change to make a future better for them. We don't need intervention just to look different. We need it to act different so that there are true changes in the lower performing students. This is something that I want to focus on as I begin a new school year. If I keep this as my driving force, I feel that I can just maybe reach one kid with whom everyone else says is unreachable. This is really important to me, and I don't want to just keep throwing logs at students. I want them to catch fire, so to speak, so that they can help to ignite a desire of learning and so that they can excel within my classroom. Do you think that one lever is more important than the others? Why or why not? Is the next question. Well, I do not think that any lever is more important than another. Each one has its own purpose and it's time for implementation. Some levers need to be heavy duty, like to raise a truck. Others just need to help pry open a jar lid. Each lever has its own specific time and its own specific importance, and if in a given situation. So I think that they all work together in a different time and place. There's not one that's really that stands over the other. For the second question, how are these vignettes similar to or different from processes and practices you've experienced in schools? Well, to begin with, new textbooks and new technology. Well, in almost every school, there's going to be some new fad, new technology, new textbook that's going to help students, so to speak, is what the publishers are going to want to have, or the inventions of this particular technology or app or whatever it might be. But sometimes adding these new things, it's just preserving the status quo within the student's learning. The tools need to be used. If it's a new textbook or a new technology, it really needs to be used properly in order to, or it needs to have context within the curriculum and the instructional strategies for it to actually work. Effective teaching can occur without all these new gadgets. These new gadgets, technology, and books, yes, they are useful, but they're only useful if the teacher uses them properly or they're properly implemented with strategic strategies and usefulness. New technology doesn't necessarily mean better test scores. It's how is that new technology going to be used to benefit the student, to help them gain better understanding, to help the information sink in, to help engage the students so that they are self-accountable for what they're learning. New evaluation and tools to ensure greater accountability. Well, again, a new tool doesn't necessarily mean greater accountability. If no one is using that tool correctly, if they don't know how to use the tool, how can you expect the accountability to be any different? They have to be able to use the tools to make things better, but they have to understand how to use these tools. New evaluation isn't going to be any better if you have a new rubric to score teachers unless they know how to use it and they know the foundation for the process. Judgmental feedback also is not going to help accountability. If you're constantly pointing fingers at a teacher for what they're doing wrong, instead of finding the areas in which they are excelling and building upon that, it's not going to help the evaluation tool or the accountability to get any better. When you're collaborating with a student's achievement and instructional strategies, first you really need to define this. You need to define what the achievement is, define what the instructional strategies are before they can be implemented. Effective arguments to a sound claim, well, you can have an argument for nearly anything. But is it sound? Is it based on data? Is it based on true evidence? If it's not, is it going to really help students? If everybody is not on the same page, one of the ways that I think is really effective is that teachers collaborate together to come up with the best way to reach students for instructional strategies. And then once they do this and they're beginning their lessons and teaching the lessons, they need to be able to calibrate to learn if what they're doing is appropriate, if it is working, if it is a process that is strategically implemented. For the next question, Frontier Rickbaugh assert that teaching and medicine are both professional endeavors where strategies used by the practitioner can result in marked differences in the outcomes for the individual served. Do you agree or disagree with this assertion? Well, yes, I do agree with this, because If a doctor prescribes a medicine or a particular treatment for a patient, there is steps that the patient is supposed to do. First, take this medicine in the morning. Then you need to do like physical therapy. You need to, eat better, whatever it might be, or take the particular medicine on a regime. If the patient doesn't follow that regime, well, the medicine can't do its job properly. The doctor is only their hands are going to be tied, for so to speak, in how well the medicine is going to work within that patient. Medicine can only do so much. If the patient, again, doesn't follow the regime, it's only going to work so far. The patient has to be accountable to what they're supposed to do within this particular scenario, because it can take twice as long for a medicine to work if it's not taken properly. This can be as far as teaching goes and learning. Teachers are there to guide students, to help them out. But a student has to have ownership in their particular learning. If they don't, it's just like with the medicine. It's going to take a lot longer. Eventually, the teaching will work, the medicine will work, but it's going to take longer for it to absorb into their brain or into the system, because they don't have that ownership. They're not helping to keep things going on within their body or within their minds. The next question: how do findings in John Hattie's How Do Students Learn Invisible Learning support an emphasis on improved instructional strategies as central priority for any initiative designed for improvement of student learning? Well, effective teaching practices have a profound impact on student learning. Specific strategies such as effective use of formative assessment, strategies that help students chunk content into manageable concepts, authentic reading and writing, and tending to student needs for emotional support are just a few specific classroom practices that the teacher can employ to improve student learning. All of these different elements, if the teacher is effectively utilizing them, can help students, such as authentic reading. Well, if a teacher is just reading to them, it's not really authentic. That kids need to have choice. They need to find something that they're interested in so they can help have that ownership within their learning and having those authentic experiences. And then writing. It shouldn't always be prescribed what the student is writing. Students should be able to write about elements on their own. They can come up with their own ideas, such as journaling. This helps the student have more initiative in their own learning and their capacity to do things. And if you chunk information into manageable concepts, it makes it a whole lot easier for students to obtain that information. Instead of just throwing the whole thing at them all at one time, you're taking it by bits and pieces. You're not giving them the whole house. You're taking it brick by brick. You're giving them manageable substances that they can obtain and hold in for the information to sink into their brains. When adjusting student perceptions, preconceptions, and helping students integrate factual knowledge and frameworks are clearly aligned to the importance of teachers seeing their classrooms through the eyes of their students. Teachers have to remember that students are kids and how they learn, and not always just to throw information at them, but help engage them through actual learning experiences and hands-on activities and finding things that interest the students within the curriculum. For the next question, describe an initiative that resulted in leverage, error, or transactional implementation of instructional practices. What efforts might have been better to support transformational utilization of more effective instructional practices? Well, for this one, transactional change is focused on a group outcome, something like a schedule change or implementation of a new evaluation system. An example that I've seen in my teaching years is when New Mexico implemented the new evaluation system. The evaluation system was 50% based off of student test scores. And then the student test scores were put into something that's called a VAM. Well, this VAM is a huge mathematical process, and it was a huge program that was very hard for students or for teachers to understand, and even the administrators, they didn't understand it themselves in order to teach it and hold teachers accountable. For myself, I taught theater, and so I was not in a tested curriculum area. Well, I was still held accountable for what they learned and for the test scores of the school. For students that I had in class, even though I didn't teach them English, I was still held accountable for their language language knowledge, and how well they did on a test. But when I asked about how the scoring was done, no one could explain it to me. The administrators themselves were just as clueless as I was on how the VAM system worked. But yet 50% of the evaluation was based off of this information. I had 160 kids, yet on my evaluation, only 5 of them showed up. And there are test scores that I was held accountable for. And it didn't really make sense on how this was all adding together. And when questions were asked across the state, a lot of people were just clueless on how to answer the questions. This particular system could have been implemented better had the state really trained the administrators on what the system looked like, how the VAM was supposed to be implemented, how the VAM actually worked, and given us the exact mathematical, code on who was responsible, how your kids were going to be tied to you with the evaluation system. Because again, the administrators themselves had a hard time understanding this, and it was really hard to get teachers to buy in to do what they had to do, even though you had to because it's what the state required. But there was not a full understanding of anyone across the state. This could have been implemented better if the state had really taught everyone how the system was going to work itself before we were being held accountable for this particular system. For the next question, what characteristics of systems that develop expertise? Well, expertise is a function of hard work, not just talent. You have to practice, just like with athletics. It doesn't come, shooting a basketball and making threes. It doesn't come overnight. You have to practice that. You have to improve your skills on a daily basis. Teaching is the same way. It doesn't come just overnight. It comes with hard work. It comes with practice and practice and practice. How an individual uses how they become within their performance is based off of over time through the practice of their skills, through honing in to become an expert in that particular field. You don't just become an expert just because you get a degree from college. You have to have practice. And it's time spent working really hard and persevering and practicing on your skill that you do eventually become an expert in teaching. What are the implications for how the systems might inform efforts when grading students and evaluating teachers? Well, evaluating teacher expertise in teaching requires the development of their skills and their demands. Expertise is not acquired when you graduate from college. It comes through a course of time. Someone who is expert in a particular subject they become one because they've spent a lot of time and a lot of effort in learning that particular subject area and practicing their skill over and over and over again. And it's not fair to hold some teachers who are struggling in the classroom. They get labeled as in need of improvement, but what do you do to improve them? How do you improve them? They're not going to become experts on their own. You have to guide them and coach them in order for them to become an expert in that field. You have to give them constructive criticism so that they can grow to become an expert in that particular field and how they're teaching. And how does being punished make you better? If you're going to be punished for something, there's got to be something that's going to help you improve. You can't just say, "Oh, you're a bad teacher." You've got to be able to learn from your mistakes, and that's the only way you become better. Is we follow through, we persevere through struggles and through failures in order to become better at what we're doing. High stakes evaluation systems, they kind of threaten the day-to-day learning of a teacher. If a teacher is held accountable for something, they have no idea what they're doing wrong, then how are they going to get better and how are they going to improve on the high stakes evaluation system if there's no coaching done by the administration? The administration has to take these people who are not performing up to level, and they've really got to coach them to help them become better. For Section 3, how are these vignettes similar to or different from processes and practices you've experienced in schools? Well, there are 3 classroom conditions that can tap learner motivation: tasks and learning activities that are relevant and meaningful, rewards and assessment, and autonomy and learner choice. Engagement occurs when the learner makes psychological investment in the learning process and takes pride in what they are learning and understanding for their own benefit, not just for grades. In the first vignette, you either have it or you don't. Well, in this one, the student thinks, well, I'm dumb. I'm smart. I'm not smart. Why should I even work at it? That not all students can learn, so why put the effort into it? It means very little unless the school employs specific strategies to avoid this. That they help to build up those lower level students that they think that so that they know that they can learn too. It's not just the higher level kids that can learn. That this is not just keep everybody on the same level, but you can learn. It's not, intelligence isn't given to you at birth. It's something you have to work with. And it ties into the growth mindset that if you teach kids that, yeah, you don't have it yet, it doesn't mean that you won't gain it. It just may take some time and some perseverance. In the next vignette, high ability math, well, this particular student, or these students, because they're showing that they can do well in math at an early age, they're put into this advanced math class. Well, it's very elitist. That there's no way for other kids to join into this unless they are performing in that level. The students are chosen at third grade, and they're going to be far more ahead than other students that aren't getting the same lessons and the same information. And so in this particular vignette, it's important to note that the hard work that's given to these students needs to be given to other students as well. An amazing turnaround. I love this vignette because this teacher doesn't just leave this lower performing student behind. She finds ways for the student to learn. Where is she struggling? And she helps this particular student learn and gain information so that she doesn't feel such a negative place, that she knows that she can overcome these struggles. She's going to have to work and persevere. But Mrs. Stevens gives her such great feedback that she begins to grow and she begins to feel positive in her learning, and she takes ownership of that and becomes better. And my job is to prepare you not to need me. I find this extremely important because the ultimate goal of education is to prepare students to live out on their own. And we can't always have them looking to us for all the answers. They've got to be able to learn and to be accountable for their own learning on their own so that they can make decisions and so that they can be self-motivated to do things on their own, like when they get to college, to do online classes. And so this is really an important vignette. The next question, how can focusing on concepts of self be used to build self-motivation, ownerships, and independence? Well, as I said before, it's so important that students make a connection to their learning and to build on this so that they can be self-aware, and so they find things that they can be engaged in and build on their own learning and their own knowledge. Again, the ultimate goal is to prepare students to live on their own. So as teachers, that's what we have to do. We have to find ways to motivate students to be self-accountable to themselves and to their own learning. They need to not learn necessarily to please the teacher, but to learn for their own sake of knowledge. This helps students to take ownership of their learning, and it helps to prepare them for their future so they can take pride in what they're doing and to further their own knowledge. And ownership leads students to independence. This is where all parents have teachers and want kids to be, at a place where they can take care of themselves and their own learning. And again, this is extremely important when it comes to going to college and taking college courses and being out on your own, being accountable to yourself. Students have to learn to do that and manage their time and be motivated to do their work on their own. And it's really important that they take an online class as well to be able to structure their motivation so that they can achieve a particular goal. For the next question, what are the implications of the statement of the learning is personal for the curriculum? Well, this statement refers to the importance that if a student can make a personal connection to what is being taught, that they have a greater chance of retaining that particular level of learning. So it's really important that the learning become personal, that the students are able to engage into the curriculum and to find something that they're interested in to try to help them to learn better. This makes the lessons more personal, and it helps the curriculum to be obtained for the students in a lot better, in a more intrinsic fashion. The instruction needs to be guided towards looking for what students are excited about and really helping that to guide the instruction to help the students become better students and more successful. And this assessment is the same way. It doesn't always have to be a pen and paper assessment, but learning to see, did they obtain the knowledge that you tried to teach within the curriculum? Were they able to retain it without the intrinsic motivations, like such as stickers and that sort of thing? They really took into the heart of what the curriculum was, and they were able to keep that knowledge throughout the course. The strategic planning goes to helping, making sure that you really, when you're planning out things, you're very you look at the elements of what the curriculum is stating and how can you get the students excited about what they're learning so that they can bring their self into that to become stronger learners.